Have you ever heard of a story so unbelievable it defies time itself? A group of young men vanished without a trace, only to awaken centuries later unchanged. This isn't science fiction. This happened. And it has baffled historians and scientists for generations. But what's the real story behind these sleepers? Our journey takes us back to a time when empires were made and broken in the blink of an eye. It's a period shrouded in mystery where powerful kings held sway over their subjects with an iron fist. Yet, there were whispers of a different kind of power, one that went beyond the grave. They called it the Valley of the Sleeping Men, and it was here, nestled among the rugged peaks of the mountains, that a handful of brave souls dared to defy the very essence of death itself. Amongst them was a small band of young men, men who refused to bend the knee to the ruthless King Solomon the Magnificent. You see, King Solomon ruled like a god over his people. He commanded their loyalty, their respect, and most importantly, their blind obedience. And his demands were simple: worship him as a deity or face the consequences. It was a choice that would test the limits of their endurance, pushing them to the brink of both physical and spiritual collapse. Yet, despite the noose tightening around their collective throats, these men stood firm. They placed their trust in a higher being, a creator who they believed was greater than any earthly king. For them, their faith was more than just a set of beliefs. It was a lifeline in a sea of despair, a beacon guiding them through the darkest of times. As the pressure mounted and the threat of imminent capture loomed large, these men realized that their time was running out. The walls of the city, once their sanctuary, now felt like the bars of a cage, trapping them within its confines. Escape seemed impossible. That is, until a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon, a way out of the suffocating grasp of the city. Under the cloak of darkness, they slipped out of the city's protective embrace, their steps light and determined as they made their way towards the hidden cave in the mountains. It was a perilous journey, fraught with danger, every shadow seeming to hold the threat of discovery. Yet they pressed on, driven by their unwavering faith and the promise of sanctuary in the cave. Upon reaching the cave, they huddled together, their breaths mingling in the darkness, and offered up a prayer. They besieged for protection, for strength, and most importantly, for guidance. Little did they know that their prayer would be answered in a way they could never have imagined. In an instant, a wave of tranquility washed over them, soothing their frayed nerves and calming their racing hearts. The fear that had been their constant companion lifted, replaced by an inexplicable sense of calm. It was as if A heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders, leaving them lighter and freer than they had ever felt before. And then, as if beckoned by an unseen force, their eyelids grew heavy, their bodies growing warmer and more relaxed with each passing moment. The last thing they remembered was the comforting embrace of their comrades, their shared faith acting as a warm blanket in the face of the unknown. And then everything went black. When they awoke, the world outside had changed dramatically. The familiar surroundings of the cave were still there, yet the world beyond had evolved in ways they could not have fathomed. Upon stepping out of the cave, they were met with a sight that made their jaws drop in astonishment. The world they knew had vanished, replaced by one that was both familiar and alien. The bustling city they once called home was now nothing but a pile of crumbled stones, reduced to dust by the relentless march of time. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As they looked down at their hands, they noticed that they had not aged a single day. Their youthful faces stared back at them from the reflections in nearby puddles, mocking their confusion with an innocence that belied the centuries that had passed. They were trapped in a timeless bubble, removed from the flow of time. But their confusion only deepened when they ventured into the nearby town in search of answers. Their old silver coins were met with stares of disbelief, and their clothing, once fashionable, was now seen as archaic and strange. It was as though they had traveled through a time portal and landed in a distant future. They soon learned that centuries had passed since their slumber. With the old kingdom reduced to a mere footnote in history, they were no longer men of the 7th century. They were men out of time. But the mysteries surrounding their slumber did not end there. As news of the men who had awakened from a long sleep spread, scholars and historians flocked to the town like moths to a flame. They examined the men, studied their tales, and searched the cave for clues to this astonishing phenomenon. What they discovered was nothing short of mind-boggling. The cave showed no signs of external aging, yet inside, centuries had vanished. The men's bodies showed no signs of decay, their skin as smooth and unblemished as the day they had entered the cave. Even their loyal dog, who had waited patiently outside the cave, was found in a state of suspended animation, seemingly frozen in time. It was as though time itself had been put on pause, respecting the sanctity of the cave and its inhabitants. But the true marvel was the men themselves. They emerged from the cave unscathed by the passage of time, their bodies and minds seemingly untouched by the centuries that had passed. Their clothing, though faded, bore no signs of significant wear. Their skin showed no wrinkles, their hair no gray. They were living relics of a bygone era, defying the natural order of things. But why? Why were they spared from the ravages of time? What was the secret behind their miraculous preservation? The answer, as often is the case, lies in the details. You see, the men had not merely fallen asleep in the cave. Their slumber was not a result of fatigue or exhaustion. Rather, it was a conscious decision, a choice they made to relinquish their lives into the hands of their Creator. They willingly surrendered themselves to a higher power, placing their fates in the hands of an unseen force. And that force, it seems, had a plan for them, a purpose that transcended the confines of time. In essence, these men were not merely sleeping. They were in a state of suspended animation, a temporary, death-like state that allowed them to escape the clutches of time. It was a miracle, a supernatural event that defied the laws of nature and left those around them in awe. But as time passed and the men remained unchanged, a sense of unease began to creep into the hearts of the townspeople. They were fascinated by the men, yes, but fear began to take root. The scholars were baffled, unable to comprehend the scientific principles behind such a phenomenon. And the townspeople, cut off from the knowledge of their ancestors and their traditions, saw the men as a threat. This wasn't about science. It was about survival. And in their desperation, they turned to superstition and fear. One by one, the men began to pass away, their bodies finally succumbing to the effects of time. It was as if their mission on earth was complete, their purpose fulfilled, and their time had come. They died as they had lived, peacefully, serenely, united in their faith. Their passing, though sorrowful, was also a testament to their resilience, their ability to endure even the cruelest tricks of fate. But their story does not end here. Their legacy, their impact on the world around them, continues to resonate even today. Their tale has been passed down through generations, evolving into a legend that has captured the imaginations of people across cultures and time periods. Sleepers of the valley, as they came to be known, became a symbol of the triumph of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can endure. Today, historians and scientists continue to search for answers, trying to unravel the mystery that surrounds the sleepers. But perhaps the truth lies not in the science, but in the faith that guided these men all those centuries ago. For in the face of adversity, their faith was their guiding light, leading them to a place where time stood still and miracles happened. So, what will you choose when the world demands you surrender what you believe? Will you stand firm like the sleepers of the valley, or will you bend before the winds of change? That, dear viewer, is for you to decide.